All right, let's jump right in. We're going to unpack a really fascinating new study here, one that uses a super powerful tool to solve a very human mystery, all inside the world of education. It's a question that schools everywhere are trying to figure out. I mean, we see all this money poured into tablets, smartboards, and software, right? But the results? They're kind of all over the place. So what's the real difference? What separates the teachers who just run with this stuff from those who, well, don't? So instead of just guessing or relying on the same old assumptions, the researchers behind this study did something really smart. They brought in a specialist. Think of it like a detective, but one who can see patterns that are totally invisible to the human eye. And that detective? Yep, it's machine learning. Okay, so where does an investigation like this even start? Well, with a huge pool of witnesses. We're talking 871 teachers, all in Bolivia, who took part in this massive survey about using tech in the classroom. And listen, this wasn't just some quick check a few boxes survey. No way. Each one of those teachers answered 189 different questions. Just do the math on that for a second. That's over 160,000 separate pieces of information. It's a literal mountain of evidence for our data detective to start digging through. So this brings us to the big question. What is this data detective, really? And how in the world does it work its magic? Let's break it down. Okay, so the easiest way to think about machine learning is like an investigator on steroids. Seriously, it can look at thousands of clues all at the same time, in this case, all those survey answers, and it finds these super subtle connections, these hidden relationships that point to the real story. The key is it learns directly from the data. And the mission here was crystal clear. The goal was to look at all 189 of those variables and find the handful of factors that actually predict whether a teacher is going to use technology in their classroom. You know what we call ICT, all the digital tools for teaching and learning.
All right, so you've got this mountain of data. What's the first thing any good detective does? You got to separate the noise from the signal, right? It's time to start narrowing down the list of suspects.
And the way they did this was incredibly thorough. They didn't just use one method. That would be too easy. No, they used this powerful combination approach. First, they filtered all 189 variables using statistical tests to kind of get a first pass. Then they had an algorithm that just kept testing different combinations over and over, kicking out the weakest one each time. After that, they used these things called tree-based models to rank which of the leftover clues were the most important. And finally, and this is the key part, they combined the results from all three methods to see which factors kept popping up again and again. It's a super rigorous process to make sure you're only looking at what really, truly matters. In this right here, this is what shows you the real power of that whole process. Our data detective started out with 189 potential suspects, right? And after all that intense work, it narrowed the field down to just 11. 11 key predictors. That is a huge difference. But here's where it gets really interesting. Those 11 clues, they weren't just random things. They all started to group together, pointing towards three big overarching themes. You could call them the three main culprits that really determine whether tech gets used in the classroom. Okay, you ready? The first, and maybe the most important one, is all about teacher motivation. The second key factor, it's the teacher's actual hands-on teaching experience. And finally, the third piece of the puzzle is the institutional environment, basically the culture and the support system inside the school itself. Okay, so what do these big ideas actually mean in the real world? Let's break it down. Motivation isn't just about feeling excited. It's about teachers who are actively planning lessons with tech in mind and who are thinking about what their students are actually interested in. Experience isn't just about how many years you've been a teacher. It's about whether you've had real hands-on time with tools like computer-assisted learning before. And environment? That's not just about whether there's a computer in the room. It's about having a supportive school director and having colleagues you can actually talk to and get help from. That stuff is crucial. But wait, the story isn't over just yet. The researchers had one last question they wanted to answer. They had all these different types of detectives, right? Different machine learning models. So they wanted to know which one was the best detective for the specific case. So what did they do? They set up a competition, a bake-off, if you will. They took their final 11 clues and fed them into 5 different predictive models, some classic, some more complex, to see which one could most accurately predict whether a teacher would use tech or not. And the results? Well, they were pretty clear. one model just kept coming out on top, test after test. It had the highest F1 score, which is basically a really good way to measure overall accuracy. And it wasn't just that, it scored best on other important metrics too, which proves it wasn't just some lucky guess. The winner, the champion detective, was a model called Random Forest. And you can see it really clearly here on this chart. I mean, yeah, the top models were all pretty close, but Random Forest was just consistently a little bit better, a little more reliable for cracking this specific case. It's definitely the star data detective of our story today. So this leaves us with a really powerful takeaway, right? This study gives schools a clear, data-driven roadmap. It's basically saying, hey, stop just buying more gadgets. The real secret sauce is motivating your teachers, giving them real hands-on experience, and building a school culture where everyone feels supported. It shows that when we use the right tools, we can get past all the guesswork and find the human factors that actually make a difference. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a data detective can solve this mystery for education, what other big, complex human questions are out there just waiting to be answered?